Tonight, Oscar Pistorius' manager describes his aggressive behaviour, his love of guns and his high-speed driving.
He would then refer back to me, remember what happened to you in 2007, and he wanted to ensure that we are safe and not being followed.
And how the London Olympics turned him into a global icon as famous as Usain Bolt. Welcome to the High Court in Pretoria, where Oscar Pistorius' defence is entering its final stages. Today the court heard from Piet van Zyl, the athlete's manager. Mr van Zyl painted an intimate picture of a man obsessed with security and guns. And he described how his gold medal winning performances at London 2012 vastly increased the money he could earn from endorsements and sponsorship. Ashish Joshi reports.
Oscar Pistorius arrived at court knowing much of the morning's session would be a forensic examination of his personality. We would learn in intimate detail more about the athlete's temper, his love of guns, and his security paranoia. We would also discover more about his relationship with Reeva Steenkamp, the model girlfriend who Oscar Pistorius shot dead on Valentine's Day last year. The details were provided by Oscar Pistorius' manager, Piet van Zyl, a close confidant and friend who had shared the runner's life for the past 8 years. The defence began by asking Mr van Zyl to describe his client's obsession with personal safety.
Through all the interaction I had with Mr. Pistorius over the years, it was very evident that, and for me the best way to describe it is basically a heightened sense of awareness. So if I can enlighten the court with specific instances, we would travel to the airport and Mr. Pistorius would be driving quite fast, coming to pick me up at home, and always offered that I can leave my car at home and we just drive with his car, and he would drive quite fast to the airport. I would then inquire from Mr. Pistorius, there's no rush, we've got enough time to make it to the airport. And he would then refer back to me stating that, remember what happened to you in 2007 when I, after another trip that we did, was hijacked at gunpoint and had a very traumatic experience, and he wanted to ensure that we are safe and not being followed. Whenever we had to park in specific, can we call it parking bays at the airport, or for instance at an event that we had to go to, he always ensured that he parked in an open space, easy access, even an enlightened space where there was enough light if it was at night, so that he could always feel safe and secure. We were in New York in 2011 at the IAAF Diamond League, and we were walking down the street just in New York and heard a loud noise, a bang, which I just basically reacted and inquisitively trying to find out what it was, or looked around to see where the noise came from, whereas in Mr. Pistorius' case, grabbed me by the arm, which was very unusual for me, and then suddenly just released again, and we just kept on walking. But it was just strange for me that he would react in such a way that he would grab me when something like this happened. We had a few occasions where sometimes late at night I would receive the schedule for the next day's events, whether it be for a photo shoot or a sponsor's commitment or something similar. I then went to Mr. Pistorius' room to give him the necessary information, and by knocking on the door, he always asked first who is at the door, and then secondly, when he opened the door was not only just locked but always had the latch on, which was also for me interesting, being in a safe environment, that he always had the latch on the door apart from just normal lock on the door. We had often spent time at Mr. Pistorius' residence to discuss either contractual obligations or also looking at the competition schedule for the season. And whenever we were sitting around the dining table, and it sometimes even was a bit annoying for me that I could never keep him focused on it, as he was always looking around, asking his housekeeper if the front door is locked, asking where the dogs are. So always fidgety, if I can describe it in such a way.
And in going to restaurants, coffee houses and so on?
Yeah, Mr. Pistorius always ensured that he took a seat at a table where he had a clear access and view to the entrance and exit of a restaurant.
As an international athlete, Oscar Pistorius travelled the world, attending races and fulfilling sponsorship obligations. The schedule was exhausting, and as his fame and celebrity spread, more demands were made on his time. According to his agent, the double amputee was keen to involve Reeva Steenkamp in his plans as much as he could. One reason was to stay close to her, but the other was to give his girlfriend an insight into his world, to show her the pressure he was under and the strain it put on his relationship with people.
Have you had occasion to meet Ms. Steenkamp?
I did meet Ms. Steenkamp.
Could you tell the court about that? How many occasions, for instance?
I can't recall the specific number of occasions, but I did meet Ms. Steenkamp on a number of occasions with Mr. Pistorius at different venues.
And seeing through your eyes, what was the relationship like?
For me, I would describe it as a loving and caring relationship. Mr. Pistorius and Ms. Steenkamp was always calling each other pet names as well.
Did he involve her in his career?
Yes, Mr. Pistorius and myself actually, and it was very interesting for me, had a meeting on the 7th of February in 2013 at his house, which was one of the things that we always did. Sat on his big dining room table, put out all the contracts, put out a calendar for the year to look at all the different competitions and scheduled events that we can do for the year, what was the main target for the year. And Mr. Pistorius then specifically asked me if I wouldn't mind to ask the organizers if he can have Ms. Steenkamp accompany him on these 2 trips, which for me was a first. He's never asked me for anything like this, to have one of his girlfriends in the past accompanying on any trips to an athletics competition. I then put a question to Mr. Pistorius, why do you want this? And his reply to me was, I actually want Ms. Steenkamp to see what my world is about, the pressure that I'm under, how I need to perform, and also that she can understand better why I sometimes cannot go to specific events or functions with her, that I have to have enough sleep in order to train and perform at the levels I'm required to perform at.
Back in 2009, Oscar Pistorius made this cameo appearance in a video for Italian rock band Negramaro. His role would later help him to impress his girlfriend. The band's record company had another star on their books, the Italian opera singer Andrea Bocelli. It was put to the runner that a trip to Italy to see the tenor in concert would be much appreciated by Reeva Steenkamp.
During our discussions with the gentleman from the music label called Sugar Music, which is a family-owned business, it was also mentioned to us that they also are the music label for Mr. Andrea Bocelli. So I said to Mr. Pistorius on this occasion, during our meeting on the 7th, that maybe it's time for us to call on this favor to see if we cannot get you 2 tickets for you and Ms. Steenkamp to go and watch this concert in Tuscany.
Now, these planned travel arrangements where Ms. Steenkamp would have accompanied him, did you discuss it with her?
Yes, I did. Mr. Pistorius was actually very excited, and he phoned on his iPhone on a video call actually, and he passed the phone on to me and said to Reeva that if I can please give her the good news, and I informed Ms. Steenkamp that she would be going with us to Brazil, and that I'm also working on a trip for her to go to Manchester with us together.
And how did she feel about it?
She was very excited and very ecstatic about the opportunity to travel with us to these different competitions.
Pete Van Zyl told the court the 2012 London Olympics and Paralympics were the making of Oscar Pistorius. A rising star before the Games, but a global icon afterwards. According to his agent, Oscar Pistorius had now been elevated to the same status as record-breaking Jamaican sprinter Usain Bolt. Not only had he become one of the most famous athletes in the world, his earnings potential had increased almost 6-fold.
Due to the amazing performances of Mr. Pistorius in London at the Olympic Games and Paralympic Games, his profile was raised to global icon, sports icon status. And I think all media would agree with me that the London Olympic Games was about two people, and that was Mr. Usain Bolt and Mr. Oscar Pistorius. Based on this and the profile that Mr. Pistorius's image carried in the business world, a lot of opportunities and a number of opportunities came our way. Mr. Pistorius, I can also confirm, is a very astute businessman, and he was very aware of the role that he had to play within his brand and the financial implications that he stood to gain in the years to come.
Coming up, the court hears how Oscar Pistorius used to go to a gun range for target practice when he couldn't sleep. Welcome back. This morning, Oscar Pistorius' manager described how the Olympian was highly concerned about his personal security. He then faced questions from Prosecutor Gerrie Nel about his client's habit of high-speed driving.
You've now explained to us why the accused would drive at a high speed when you were with him. But you know that that's what he did. He drove at a high speed.
He drove specifically at high speed when I was in the car when we were on the way to the
And were
airport.
you not? You've heard reports that he was driving at high speed.
I have heard reports, but as I said, I wasn't witness to that specifically.
Let's talk about those reports. Tell me what you heard.
That there was reports that Mr. Pistorius drove at high speed. When I confronted Mr. Pistorius, he specifically referred to the incident that he said he wanted to ensure that we're not followed, that we are fine, and that's why he drove at high speed.
Now, when the athletes reported to you, what did you do? Did you discuss it with Mr. Pistorius?
No, I did not discuss it with
Why
Mr. Pistorius.
Why would you allow him to drive at high speed with other athletes and not deal with it?
In the instance when we drove at high speed, he did not drive reckless. So I didn't deem it as reckless driving and didn't deem it as necessary to discuss it with Mr. Pistorius.
So did the athletes report to you or did they complain to you?
No, they just mentioned it. No one ever complained to me about it.
Mr. Van Zyl then defended Mr. Pistorius for losing his temper at the London Olympics when he accused Brazilian sprinter Alan Oliveira of cheating in the final of the 200 metres by using longer blades.
You now dealt with instances where the accused got annoyed and lost his temper, but you forgot about that instance where he called the person that beat him a cheat.
I did not forget about that. I wasn't in London during the London Paralympic Games myself during that specific incident. I also did not have accreditation, so I wasn't allowed in the media zone.
But you know about it.
I know about it.
You didn't tell the court about that. Why not?
Because, as I said in my earlier testimony, that I only explained about the two specific instances where I was present with Mr. Pistorius.
Now, did you deal with Mr. Pistorius when he called the person that beat him in the 200-meter cheat?
Yes, there was the company that we make use of, Fast Track in the UK, that was specifically targeted and trusted with dealing with all the PR related to the Olympic and Paralympic Games while Mr. Pistorius was in London. This incident had a long lead up. From April already in 2012, Mr. Pistorius was contacted by various athletes that's competing in his same class, and more specifically the single amputee guys, that stated that because they have one normal leg and one artificial limb, they cannot change their legs, whereas the specific athlete that is referred to here changed his legs from different events, and the athletes felt that this person is not playing fair, and Mr. Pistorius took upon himself to then contact the IPC and specifically requested that there be more specific guidelines as to what is allowed and not allowed. Mr. Pistorius himself subjected himself in 2007 to a severe battery of tests to prove that he didn't have an advantage, and he stuck to that specific leg, so he always played within the rules.
But he lost his temper on the day.
He lost his temper on the day.
Or are you telling the court that because of the run-up, he did it deliberately?
No, Mr. Pistorius lost his temper on the day.
So that's all we're dealing with. We're dealing with. So you're saying he lost his temper, but there's a reason why he lost his temper.
But the court then heard that at the games, Mr. Pistorius' roommate was so annoyed with him, he asked to change rooms.
There was an incident that I read about at the Olympics where Mr. Pistorius' roommate asked to be allocated a different room. Do you know about that?
I am aware and was made aware of that by the team management of the South African team.
And the reason the man gave was that Mr. Pistorius would be constantly on his phone arguing with people and he couldn't take it anymore. That's what I read.
No one specifically mentioned that Mr. Pistorius was constantly on the phone. To me, personally.
Okay. As far as you're concerned, what was the reason? Why did the man want to leave the room?
Well, this specific athlete, I don't know even who this specific athlete was that is referred to, must have had his reasons why he wanted Mr. Pistorius to not share with him. It was never specifically put to me that that is the reason why this person wanted to leave the room.
I don't ask specifics, Mr. Van Zyl, you're avoiding the question. As you sit there, why did he want to leave the room? That's such an easy question.
He wanted to leave the room because of Oscar being on the phone, as Mr. Nel has stated and that he read in a report.
Now I'm worried. Because you specifically said 3-4 questions ago that you never knew that was a reason. Now you want to furnish that as a reason. Now I'm worried.
Mr. Van Zyl was asked about his client's passion for firearms.
I've never seen him carry a gun, never knew even that he was taking part in shooting activities at shooting ranges or anything of the nature.
Did you talk to him about the gun?
When I saw Mr. Pistorius carrying a gun, and the specific incident was when he was at my residence, I asked him why he was carrying a gun. He specifically replied to me that he's carrying a gun because he's fearing for his own safety.
Did you ever read an article where a British journalist visited Mr. Pistorius at his house? And Mr. Pistorius said to him that he would go out at night to the practice range to practice shooting if he couldn't sleep.
I read this article at some stage. I cannot recall specifically when, but when it was published, I did read an article.
Okay. Did you discuss it with Mr. Pistorius?
I did not discuss it with Mr. Pistorius.
The article that I'm talking about, would you say that was a positive or negative article that you read?
At that stage, I didn't see it as anything negative. That was for me a way that Mr. Pistorius could go and spend time by himself, not sleeping.
Well, today we've been given a fascinating insight into the private world of Oscar Pistorius by one of his closest associates. To discuss today's evidence with me, I have former South African detective Lobo das Neves and former QC Kobus van Rooyen. Gentlemen, thanks very much for joining me. Lobo, first of all, tell me about what you made of Mr. Van Zyl's evidence.
Well, obviously his evidence is directed to help his client, and he wasn't forthcoming with all the information he had when he gave his evidence in chief.
What did you think was missing?
Well, for instance, he never mentioned the incident with the Olympics where the accused made a big hula about the previous runners' blades, and that was just left out conveniently.
But brought up under cross-examination?
Only then.
Now, it was interesting, wasn't it, Kobus, that we heard in cross-examination from Gerrie Nel saying he was surprised that the defence had brought forward a character witness this late in the game. How unusual is it to have this kind of character evidence this late on in the trial?
Firstly, there's nothing unusual ever in this kind of case, and this has happened many times before in other cases. It's not the first time. He could have asked a postponement if he wanted one. And what is more, the defence is there not to prove its case, but to create a doubt, and the judge in the end, with her two people sitting with her there, they're the people who have to decide. So they have to look at the whole picture, and I remember when I acted as a judge calling in a witness right at the end to check something, and that's perfectly within the rules.
But we're right down to the last few witnesses now. Loba, you were telling me you're surprised by the evidence that we haven't heard in the defence. What do you think has been missing?
Well, Barry Rue, at the very beginning of the case, said that he would bring evidence to court proving that the sound of a cricket bat and that of a firearm was similar. Now, yesterday he had an opportunity to use his sound engineer to prove his theory, and it wasn't done at all, wasn't even mentioned. And my theory behind that is because it's not true. There is no similarity between the two, and that's why that evidence was not led.
And in terms of the continuing cross-examination of Piet van Zyl, how much further do you think that Gerrie Nel can go with this?
Well, there's a lot of room for Gerrie to ask a bunch of questions about his integrity as a witness, because a witness is supposed to be objective, and there's a question over that.
In terms of the case as a whole, what have you made of the defence's case? There are some people who've said it's been a bit bitty, some of the expert work appears to have been done very late in the day. Briefly, both of you, what have you thought?
Well, I sometimes find it difficult to distinguish between a defense witness and a witness for the state.
Which is never a good sign, Kobus.
Remember, the state only puts the facts before the court, needn't win the case. All the facts should be brought before the judge, and then they will put all the facts together, and that would hopefully lead to this grand, correct conclusion.
And once it wraps up, we have a break, and then they come back for closing arguments,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So we're still some time away from having a verdict in this trial. So as it is, the defence is drawing to a close, and remember that we will be bringing you special programmes every evening in which there's evidence and a full roundup at the weekend. For now though, goodbye from Pretoria.